Oh yeah,
No, mate, how are you doing?
pretty good. I'm early.
Yeah, cheers for that. I thought I'd jump on early as well. Whereabouts are you?
Brighton.
Okay, cool. Is that where you're from?
Nah, I've been here over 20 years though. Where are you?
I'm in Manchester.
Nice. I lived in Chiltern for a while.
Oh, really? Whereabouts?
When? Oh man, probably about 6 years ago or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm
Nice
one of
place.
the Southern Ponces that moves to Chiltern. Southerners go, isn't it?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's like the Sturton Newington of Manchester or something.
Yeah, on the BBC twats. Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Um, but yeah. Thanks for doing this, mate. I've been really enjoying listening to your music this week. Um, don't know if it's because of the weather, but it kind of like matches the weather. I think very uplifting.
Yeah.
But yeah, just back to where it all started, really. Am I right in thinking you were a documentary filmmaker before the music?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I was doing it for probably like 10 years or something. Just coming home from work and monkeying around on my sampler. I'd be off around the world making generally programs about like bog bodies and mummies and skeletons and stuff like that for some reason. That seemed to be what we specialized in. So yeah, I did that for a while. And all the while I was kind of, coming home and slogging over it for like 10 years probably, or it was probably like 20 years in the making, the Go team, really, from from sort of student days when I had always wanted to bands to be a bit more schizophrenic and a bit more clashy and stuff like that. Even back in those days, I was into that idea, but it took decades for it to be realized.
Yeah, and I was looking at the listening party you did with Tim Burgess, and he kind of said, a lot of the songs sound like they could be like TV theme tunes or something like that. Did it kind of influence the music, the work you were doing?
Not so much that, but I'd be lying if I said as a kid my ears wouldn't, my ears would prick up whenever I heard a theme tune, particularly an action-packed one. And I've always kind of had an interest in theme tunes. There seem to be like a sort of 30-second distillation of the essence of the program, and they're better than the program. They're kind of the more dynamic and um yeah. So as a kid, I would kind of think, hang on, what's so good about the Charlie's Angels theme or something like that, or and try and decode it and think, what is it? What's so good about this? And it seems to be like music, but heightened. It seemed to be kind of like an amped up version of music. Theme tunes do, particularly back in the day. So that's kind of in there, but I think people might overstate that as well. But simultaneously, I'm from a kind of a noisy background. I think that was kind of my entry into music, was kind of noisy guitars and stuff. So I think maybe people might assume with the Go team that I'm from a clubby background, or sort of more like I don't know, someone like Bentley Rhythm Ace or Avalanches or something, which I think they're from more of a kind of a clubby DJ kind of background. I'm from a kind of a noise guitar background. So that element of kind of chaos and noise kind of is kind of what separates us, I think, from those kind of more dancey acts. It's that kind of aesthetic of chaos and noise, which is kind of my roots. It kind of permeates all of the music, even if it is apparently a kind of a I don't know, some sunshine funk song or something like that. I think hopefully that aesthetic of that four tracky, feedbacky, noisy aesthetic kind of permeates it all.
Yeah. And then with like the Get It Together EP, like
Mm.
what was the catalyst for pulling that together?
Well, that was really just what the 10 years had culminated in. I'd arrived at the first song which I thought I could call a Go Team song, which was Get It Together. It was quite a strange song, but it kind of touched on everything I was into, from the Jackson 5, sort of electro, the kind of harmonics are a bit kind of Sonic Youthy, and it's got a banjo in there, and it was kind of pulling you in all these different directions at the same time. It was a song which I hadn't really heard anyone do before. So that was the first song, more than anything else on the EP, when I could go, okay, that's it. That's what the Go Team is, And that was back in 2000, man. So that was like fucking 24 years ago. But yeah, so that was the kicking off point. And then it was a question of kind of adding to it, and kind of, I almost thought of it as creating a world, a parallel dimension, a kind of a schizophrenic, technicolor parallel dimension where all of these things could coexist, and without it sounding forced or try hard or anything. So that was the game. The game was on then to try and nail that idea, and obsessively go through, find these samples and layer them with other stuff. And so they would exist for years as these little cassettes with little ideas on them. So it would have the intro to Lady Flash on one cassette, and then the middle eight on another one, or something like that. So over time I would try these things next to each other, and over years they kind of arranged themselves into what seemed like an album, a coherent vision.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the songwriting process, because I imagine it's pretty different to most of the guests we've had on. So it would be just like ideas and samples that you pull together that eventually make it into one song.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it more as something like hoarding or mining or something like that, rather than, like you say, most bands might get in a room together and jam, and they kind of arrive at it. I would hoard ideas and remember them, and the best stuff kind of rises to the top, and you try things next to each other. So it was more like sort of trial and error than traditional songwriting, And simultaneously, I was trying to write songs which were kind of could stand on their own as a kind of a classic bit of songwriting, but also try and be sort of clashy and juxtaposy and schizo, that they would kind of jar in some way. So it's like my brain split in two. I'm trying to write a classic song which you could play on a guitar, but really I want to kind of fuck it up and make it quite sort of channel hoppy.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great melodies like throughout the albums. But how would you come across those? Would you come up with some, or would it be like influence from samples you'd get, or Ninja's influence?
It's sheer graft, really. I mean, I'd say melodies are what I'm most interested in, which most people might not think. And they are really elusive. I think, I probably use like less than 1% of everything I write. So I just keep going and going and going and going and going and going every day. And again, the good shit kind of reveals itself over time, because you remember it and you sing it, and even my kid like sings it sometimes, so I know that it's a good sign. But yeah, I mean, catchiness is a funny thing. It's about being the right kind of catchy, and I think, I kind of think of myself as being in the hook business. That's kind of what I'm most interested in, and those elusive little melodies that kind of get stuck in your head in the right way. That's what keeps me going. I'm interested in the song as this potentially perfect thing. So I'm just trying to kind of do it justice, and I think I don't want to waste people's time, really. I think there's too much music around, and I'd turn on Six Music and just nothing jumps out most of the time. I don't think choruses are that good most of the time. So I try and really just do a greatest hits every time.
Yeah, I mean, every song's pretty immediate. That's what I got from listening this week. Like, you kind of brought into it quite quickly, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. You've got to. It's about action as well. I mean, people do say that you can clock a Go Team song pretty much straight away. I don't know whether that's the sort of. There are a few kind of sonic fingerprints from the kind of the trashy drum sound or blaring trumpets or stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's the classic pop song in a way is what's driving me, but at the same time it's not. I'm kind of split all the time, because pop can be the best and the worst thing you've ever heard. It can be Steps or it could be I Want You Back, Jackson 5. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then just like the recording techniques, obviously it's like a lo-fi kind of vibe to it. You mentioned the 4-track, like how is that how you'd record in the early days?
um yes, really early, and I even went to reel in the really early days. So when things are sort of buckling under the weight of everything, that's kind of the reel to reel, just kind of compressing it all. But I've yeah, it's more of an aesthetic really. I have bounced things to cassette and VHS and all sorts of stuff like that, and you know in some ways the Go Team's like an exercise in how we fuck things up. It's about distortion and stuff like that. But in the early days, people would complain that it was too lo-fi, and even write letters of complaint that there's something wrong with their CD or something. Some German bloke, there's something. I've got a faulty CD here. But for me, the production is intrinsic to it. It's not just a recorder; it's a recorder with distortion on it. It's pretty crucial difference for me. It's all it's all interlinked and it's all essential. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm all right thinking you've produced every album along with your brother with some of them as well.
Yeah, the first few were with my bro. So that was cool. The last few I've mixed myself. Yeah, even though I kind of don't know what I'm doing. Um, uh, yeah, I mean it's all a balancing act. It's about energy without kind of fatigue. You can a whole album of can get a bit draining. So I think Light and Shade is a bit more in the front of my mind these days, and contrast and drops and stuff like that. That's why bands like the Pixies were so big, is that people love the drop, people love contrast and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And then like, did you find yourself with you at the wheel for everything kind of thing? Did you find yourself being a bit of a perfectionist, or did you know when to like put it down kind of thing?
Kind of. I mean, it's not really a word you associate with the band really, because it is apparently so kind of ramshackle. But yeah, undoubtedly, I I think the perfectionist thing comes at the melody stage really. I think once you've got that locked down, that's sort of 90% of the work really, and everything else just makes it better. Uh, but I'm not kind of like a sort of Kevin Shields esque, frequency nerd, where everything has to. It is quite. Yeah, I think that the perfectionist thing comes from the creation stage where you're just hoarding these ideas for weeks and years and months and finding a home for it. So I don't know if many people would have the patience to go through all these samples daily. People would get pretty tired of that shit. But I will happily, listen to Italian soundtrack 60 soundtracks for a month or something like that. And put it in my pile of good shit. And yeah, and so generally the process of that gathers samples, but also triggers ideas. So I think I've never had writer's block, because my writing process is that I just will just listen to music all day, and it will generate ideas and stuff like that. So I'm never, sitting in a room with my guitar going, oh, what should I do now? It's always generated by other stuff, and it's a really good way of kind of loosening up your brain. And so yeah, I mean, I listen to hundreds of records every day when I'm in the songwriting phase.
Yeah. And have you like ever picked up songwriting techniques from elsewhere? Has it always been like kind of what worked for you kind of thing?
Really, I don't know if it's something you can really pick up. Really, I think I've got more into lyric writing in the last few years, and the idea that the chorus. I like the process of coming up with a melody, and then the kind of stream of consciousness. What kind of jumps out to go along with that. So I had, on the last album, I had a song called, which went da 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 da. So the melody that came out of that was going nowhere. That just seemed to make sense.
Oh, I like that song, yeah.
And then the question becomes, the verse is kind of answering the question which the chorus is posing. So I'm kind of gotten quite into that idea of the kind of the classic structure of what lyrics should do and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of techniques. I mean, this Dom from White Horses uses the trick of reversing pop songs to see if it generates, getting a Bee Gees song and flipping it around and see if there's some kind of, there's lots of different tricks. But I just think it's just purely just showing up, going and going and going, and one day, who knows, something might drop from the sky. Those moments, I love those moments where you've kind of almost given up for the day, and then one extra thing comes, and that's the good shit. But a song like Mayday, most of my songs are about 6 or 7 ideas kind of shoved together, and it's those moments where they kind of drop together. The fact that on Mayday, the Mayday, Mayday kind of naturally spelt itself out, and then the idea of putting Morse code on top of that instantly just felt right. And then you could put that in the chorus, and then okay, so the lyrics have got to be about someone who's in trouble somewhere. So I like those sort of 60s songs about girls, those sort of melodramatic girls in heartbreak kind of situations. So it kind of made sense for it to be about some kind of chick in trouble. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it happens, it falls from the sky and it comes together. Other weeks you can go forever without anything happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And I might be reading this wrong, but I think I read that one of the techniques was like you'd have ideas for chords for a song, but instead of creating them yourself, you go to look in samples to find the different chords and pull them together. Is that right?
It's not really a songwriting pick. That's when the song is locked down. I would like the idea of, so I mean, the worst example of using samples is where you just kind of get somebody else's cool song and stick a beat on it, maybe some rap in, and call it a song. But so I kind of want to get as far away from that as possible. So I like the idea of writing your own song and then building it from different chords. So you get the G from an electro song, a D from a Northern Soul song, whatever. So you're making it much more sort of channel hoppy. So yeah, I've always been into that idea, and I think I could explore that a lot more. I think there's a lot more mileage in that. It's quite a hard thing to get right. Yeah, I mean, even when I was in university, I made a film called Channel Hopping, and which was quite sort of cut and pasty and stuff. So this idea of choppiness has always been there as an aesthetic goal, and I still think there's so much mileage in that no one's really nailed properly. I don't think that you can have both an amazing song and something that's just really wobbly and cut up and schizo and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So just going back to the timeline type of thing. I'm all right thinking you started it just as a solo project. That was the idea.
Wasn't the idea, but it happened to be that way, and that I was just doing it all. I always knew it would never just be me on a stage. You know, that wasn't an option. I knew I wanted to have a gang. It's just that that was the way round I did it. I knew that I wanted it to be mixture of blokes and ladies. Lots to do with the kind of the climate of the time. You know, in the 2000s, it was very NME kind of male boys club, wet dream fest. You know, it was lads on tour. You know, the Skinny Jean Brigade, and so I kind of wanted to get away from that and have a much more of a diverse, mixed race, potentially male and female, technicolor. You know, try and get away from that kind of lads on tour kind of NME type image. So yeah, I knew that that was the key to making it real, and instrument swapping had to be there just because the songs are so varied. You know, double drumming. I've always liked bands which do double drumming because it looks cool and it sounds good. It's a bit showy offy, but yeah, I mean, and so people that could play lots of instruments, they had to be in there, you know, just because of the nature of the music, you know. Um, People often talk about the Go Team kind of all sounding the same, but I'm kind of thinking, really, I think it's quite. I think the the brief is pretty broad, really. I think there is something which flows between everything, but um, I think, yeah, I mean, you know, I think of it as a compliment in a way that is quite recognizable, but I don't really think it's that true, you know.
No, yeah, definitely, yeah. And with the NME then, like you mentioned all that was going on in terms of like the boys in the band type vibe, but then you were doing tours with them. Like, did you do an NME Freshers tour or
Yeah,
something?
I chalked that up as one of the regrets. Yeah,
All right.
that was a bad move. Yeah.
How come?
It was just lame. I I mean, I've always hated the enemy, so we kind of, yeah, we sold out. Mm.
Fair enough. Were they quite supportive though, the enemy, or not really?
They blew hot and cold. Yeah,
Okay.
it was literally from week to week. Who knew? Yeah, yeah. Luckily, we don't have that problem anymore of
Yes.
of, of that kind of bitchiness in the music press. You know, who could make or break someone overnight. Luckily, we have just people just in the time it takes to read a music review, they can listen to the song on Spotify and make their own mind up. I suppose, you know, I guess that's the difference, isn't it? Mm.
Yeah. I suppose like, we've had a lot of negative chat about the age of streaming, but I guess that's one of the positives that people can make their own mind up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then talking of people who were supporting John Peel, did he get into that first EP? Like, how did he hear it? Did you send him it?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I was on a tiny little bedroom label called Pickled Egg Records, and they must have sent it to Peel, and yeah, that was the first play. It's funny how you make music, how everything just happens in stages, and you get to the first stage, you know, Peel playing. I couldn't believe it. You know, it was fantasy land, and then the idea of making an album. Okay, I've never thought of making an album, and then, so it just kind of comes in stages, and then you get signed, then you go to a major, and then you're buddy on Jules Holland, and then you're top of the pops and Japan, and you know, it just these things just kind of come in stages that you never thought would happen, you know. But I mean, I guess the thing I was most pleased with is that it was very kind of word of mouthy. Um, Particularly in the early days, it was, you know, everyone sort of tipping each other off, and the internet, it was very sort of bloggy. There were kind of blog bands at the time, weren't there? In that sort of mid 90s, you know. Um, so yeah, it happened quite naturally, and it seemed to be that just that this sort of tidal wave of people just kind of tipping each other off, and yeah, I didn't have to sell out or anything, or the label never said, okay, can you clean up that snare drum sound for Six Music or whatever. I'd never had that conversation. They knew that what the deal was. I've had, when we signed to a major briefly, I had that conversation. They said, can you just tone it down a bit? And I was like, nope, very not.
What point was that?
You're sorry?
What point was that?
I remember when we did the Mercury Awards,
Okay.
some I think must have been from Sony or something sidled up to me and had that conversation. You didn't kind of, they didn't grasp that was a part of it, and a key part. So yeah, sure enough, we were not on a major for the second album for that reason.
Yeah, yeah. So what point were you playing live? Was it after? Was it before the first album or after the first album?
No, I mean the album was out there and was getting heat pretty soon. And then the offers started coming in, and particularly this one in Sweden, this really hipster festival called Accelerator, and I agreed to do it, but didn't have a band, so the clock was ticking. Um, the hardest one to find was Ninja, was to find a lead singer, someone who could kind of put the go team. And everyone else, yeah, it was pretty much, do you want to do it? Okay, you're in the band. And we had band practices in King's Cross, and Ninja just didn't open her mouth to sing for weeks. She'd
Really?
turn up at the practice, we'd be playing them, and she just was just watching it, just in her brain, just thinking, where do I fit in all this? She was psyching herself up. I could see it was, I kind of had a feeling that she was going to come good, but it was pretty fucking sketchy. Yeah. And then we got to Sweden. First night was a bit shit. Second night was a bit shit. Third night, I remember thinking, okay, we could probably pull this off. I think this could actually be a genuine live experience. And then things started coming in really quickly. Just the hype was just ridiculous. Jules Holland, Top of the Pops, offers from around the world, Australia. Yeah, I mean, we never had to work hard at it at all. There was no kind of backroom pub tours, slogging our way around Britain. It was straight in. It happened too quickly, really. It was I'd have preferred to have been one of those slow burn bands, I think, because our set list was so short. I mean, the album Thunder Lightning Strike was only like 35 minutes long or something. So it was like, thank you, good night, and 5 songs or something. So people would inevitably leave the gig thinking, what was that it? And it was like, oh, fucking hell, man, we've only been together for a few months. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it was the same in America. We sold out everywhere. It really touched a nerve over there. Lots to do with Pitchfork and that. But I think it's because it kind of fell from the sky as this kind of fully formed idea, I guess. It was this coherent kind of vision that flowed through the whole album. That, yeah, don't know, touched a nerve, and it was quite original. That was the thing I remember when the album was mixed. I remember thinking, I didn't think it was going to do well or anything particularly, but I just remember thinking it's pretty fucking original. I can't think of anyone else that sounds like this.
Yeah, yeah. And then just skipping back to recording that first album, I'm right in thinking you just did it with your brother while your parents were away in their house or something?
Yeah, I mean, my bro only came in at the mixing stage, so
Okay.
yeah, it's there was a drum kit set up in their kitchen, and the record button was downstairs in the basement, so I would hit record, then run up and try and do a take and fuck it up and come down again and just keep doing that. But yeah, I mean, if I like thinking, I like imagining those kind of kitcheny, bedroomy things with albums rather than spunking money in posh studios. I like that feel of doing stuff yourself. And yeah, I mean, I'm not I'm not an amazing musician or anything. I'm I couldn't shred, I couldn't do a guitar solo for you or anything, but I guess I didn't need to. The songs kind of did what they needed to do. Um, so yeah, if the reason it sounds like it's recorded in a garage, it's because it was.
But like, I feel like all the albums kind of maintain that kind of exciting sound to them. That like lo-fi kind of, and a lot of bands lose that kind of exciting sound, like it's all new. Whereas you kind of like been able to maintain that. Have you always like kind of recorded in the same way?
I don't know if it's necessarily a recording thing. I think it's more about the songs, really. I mean, I've always loved, if you could encapsulate the sound, it would be in a crash cymbal. I think it's it's that sort of whooshiness of a crash cymbal, which maybe is what flows through, and it subconsciously conjures up excitement and stuff like that. But I think it's lots of it's in the songwriting, really. I think hopefully that's what gives it the excitement. I actually slog away in this, but I want it to sound like it was just thrown together. That it's just just coming at you. Yeah, I mean, excitement. I think songs should be exciting, really. Like I say, I don't want to waste people's time. I don't really want them to slog through some kind of singer-songwritery, let me sing about my life kind of thing. I'll leave that to people. But I think, I mean, it's the way. I mean, I always go back to Motown. Really, I think they managed to capture excitement. And I think it's in the distortion, and it's the urgency of it and stuff like that. But I mean, people often bang on about happiness and stuff like that. It should be prescribed in the NHS or whatever. Or that's what I read all the time. But I'm never actively setting out to write happy songs. I wouldn't. It's never been a kind of a mission statement or anything. But I do think it's a kind of a byproduct of that excitement thing, that kind of coming in your face kind of thing. And it seems to be some kind of songwriting quirk of mine that I can't get rid of. So, it's a weird thing that I wouldn't, I couldn't. I don't know. I mean, I'm naturally attracted to action-packed, dynamic stuff. And it's, yeah, like I say, I think this kind of happy, the H word is the byproduct. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely uplifting. I suppose that's the same as happy, I don't know. But yeah, there's something with the samples on the first record as well. Is that right? Where you hadn't cleared them, you just didn't think it'd get that kind of listen to.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite sort of guerrilla songwriting. I would like a song like Lady Flash had probably over 10, 12 samples in it, something like that, and they were all uncleared. So when we signed to a major, that's they weren't gonna take the risk on that. So they had to go back through everything, and some people wouldn't say yes. And I had a musicologist kind of breathing down my neck, going, "Oh, that's not different enough." And so it was an absolute pain in the bollocks. And when your brain is expecting a certain thing and it's not hearing that, it's like really jarring, and you can't quite you can't unhear what it's supposed to be. So it was quite a painful process, but I'm a lot more laid back about it now. I don't I think my label just doesn't clear anything anymore. I mean, it's so obscure. I mean, these are bloody easy listening records, from whatever. No one knew this stuff, but a major label doesn't have that ability to distinguish that. I mean, thankfully it wasn't too bad. I mean, I was willing to prioritize the song over money and publishing, so I would clear something and keep it how it was supposed to be. Because we went through the horrible process of sample recreation, which is that's a nasty world. There are some things which you can nail, and other things you just can't. It's a complete X factor of mics, session players, the room, the vibe, whatever you want to say. There's some things you just can never recreate. So I was willing just to throw money at stuff to keep it as it's supposed to be.
So what would be the process there? You'd be trying to recreate a sample that sounded different enough not to be kind of copyrighted?
Sometimes it was just to get around the master recording. So we would, or if there wasn't any publishing in it, say if it was just a drone or something, or we could save money by recreating it.
Okay.
That's all. Yeah. There's two different sides. There's the publishing and there's the mastering, which is the actual recording. But often it's that's exactly what you're in the game for, is that difference between stuff. It's about tones and it's about the clash of stuff. So it's kind of, you're losing the essence if you start making it this kind of homogenous, coherent thing. You want to see the joins. You want it to sound like there's bloody sellotape over the over the cracks.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Ninja, and I was reading on the listening party that within a year of first having contact with her over email, you were traveling the world and playing the likes of Top of the Pops and stuff. Like, how mad was that, really, if you can sum it up?
What, the whole of that first year?
Yeah.
I mean, it was simultaneously, it was really unexpected. It was kind of stressful because it was all on my shoulders in a way. It was the what do I do next kind of a question. And we would literally not go home for 2 months. It would be Japan and then on to Australia, and we couldn't keep up. We could literally have been on the road. But I think the live shows, the actual physicality of the live shows, and the kind of that's what keeps me going, and that's what it's not a song it's not a gig where you can just phone it in. You just stand there knocking off chords. We all move with it, and it was an unspoken law of the band was that every night we would give it everything, which kind of lends itself to the music and the band name, but it was never like, hey, we're going to do this. It was just a thing which happened. So I think that's what carried me through, was the fun of playing live and jumping around, and that's still the case. It's modern life, normal life is quite humdrum, but when you're on stage, it's like life is more visceral and it's more exciting. It's just everything's dialed up more, and it's like you're living more in that hour.
Yeah. And always interested in Top of the Pops. Like, what was that experience like? Do you remember who else was playing?
I don't remember who. I remember Bell and Sebastian were on as well. I can't remember anyone else, to be honest. I mean, it was amazingly soulless at that point. It was a Monday morning. I think it was about 10 in the morning.
Really?
With about fucking 30 people that they would just kind of shepherd around and push where they needed them to be. Half the band weren't actually in the country. They were in Australia. I think we were going to play there, and they just went ahead. so we had to kind of pretend the band. We had to cobble a band with. We had some fella with a helmet on, and so it kind of wasn't the real band. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those, chalk it up, because it was in its death. I think it was literally one of the last few episodes they ever made. So it was kind of one of those, let's get it under our belts, for the grandkids sort of job,
Yeah. And then Mercury Prize nomination, is that kind of, I don't know, obviously seems like the most respected, or one of the most respected awards to be up for. Was that pretty cool at the time, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were on tour in Seattle, and I remember getting a text from our label saying it's Mercury a go go. That was what the text said. And I knew straight away that things would sort of change a bit when that happened. I mean, I don't really rate the Mercury Prize, to be honest. I think it's a bit of a load of bollocks, but it's certainly it's really helpful for young bands. And it's just an interesting night. Just the industry, the music industry was quite different around then. It was kind of in though, it was in the kind of the final years of the traditional music industry, of the kind of the coked up music lawyers everywhere, the lot of money knocking around. It was still in the kind of the glory days of the music industry, I think. So it's quite interesting just to be around that. In fact, the whole experience of living in the two, of existing through the downfall of the music industries, is interesting. We were kind of right at the point where people were still buying records, and I've got a gold disc in my wall in there, because it sold like 250,000. This is because people were still buying records. People wouldn't. It just doesn't happen anymore. So yeah, it was interesting to be around at that time, in those the end of the good times for the labels. So yeah, it was just an interesting night. I knew that it was a one-off, and make the most of it.
Yeah. And like you've mentioned, you're kind of like strong-minded enough to do your own thing in terms of the music. Was it the same with social stuff like that, and like the typical idea of touring? Did you kind of just do your own thing?
How do you mean, me personally, or as a band?
Yeah, both really.
We'd have a laugh on the road, to be honest. I mean, yeah, we weren't a traditional lads on tour type band, but I don't think that was ever going to happen. Like Ninja doesn't drink. I don't think she's ever drunk. So it was always going to be a different dynamic to the classic mythology around the rock band. But Ninjas doesn't need to drink. She's got the most bloody psychedelic brain I've ever known. She's like, she literally doesn't need to. She's a handful enough already. So yeah, I mean, in a way, we were. It was always going to be, and I remember some Sunday Times journalists following us around, and in the piece commented about how kind of there were no groupies or anything like that. And I took him, I spelled out before, it's like, we're not fucking baby shambles, you know what I mean? We're just having a laugh on tour. That's about it, you know what I mean? So I've never, we're not Motley Crue, but we're not bloody the Carpenters either,
And I saw at one point you played with LCD Sound System. I was just interested in how much.
I don't think that's true.
Oh, really? I thought you said you played with them and Soulwax at some point.
I mean, we were on the big day out in Australia with them.
All right.
I don't remember at all playing with them.
I think it was in London, and Juliet Lewis's band are playing.
Oh, right, okay. I think I've forgotten about that. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, Yeah, that was way early. Yeah, okay, yeah. I remember Juliette Lewis. I don't remember the other two.
Ah, fair enough. Because I just wondered how
I
much
think
you're. Go
they
on,
probably
sorry.
were there. I don't know if I grasped the occasion. Yeah.
I just wondered how much you're into like the whole DFA thing, if at all, with like the Rapture and LCD sound system.
Bits and pieces. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't particularly been an influence. I mean, I remember hearing a Too Many DJs song, where they mixed the Stooges and Salt and Pepper, and I remember thinking, bloody hell, man, why isn't anyone making a band that aims at that? You know, why can't there be a band that sounds like the Stooges and Salt and Pepper? You know, so I guess that was and I guess the real reason is that those worlds don't really collide. You know, is they're physically separated. So I think that was part of the idea on the mission statement of the band was to try and you know, bring a kind of black and white music together in this kind of unself-conscious, natural, why doesn't this exist already kind of way, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And I wanted to ask about, you mentioned, I think, maybe on the listening party that when, you know, you got the band together, that like the likes of Ninja kind of would change the way you went about things in terms of like maybe she would freestyle over certain things. Is that
Yeah, I mean,
right?
we weren't trying to slavishly copy the album. I mean, I would be up for Ninja changing stuff a bit along the way because you know I want her to feel involved and have some say in it and stuff. Um, yeah, she wasn't exactly freestyling, but she did write lyrics here and there. Yeah,
Okay. And then with a song like A Version of Myself, did you write that?
yeah,
Yeah, it's just interesting. It sounds like, I don't know, it had like a Moldy Peaches vibe to it that I thought
yeah.
um maybe was influenced by someone else, but it's interesting that you wrote that as well, yeah.
Oh yeah. Our drummer Kai used to sing that one. Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's cool sounding. And yeah, just like in terms of in terms of like other bands, then were you good friends with other bands, or were you just doing your own thing, really?
There's certain bands we would cross paths with along the way. Back in the day. I mean, yeah, I mean people like that we would kind of get to people we probably don't remember now. People like the research
I
and
remember them, yeah.
yeah. Um yeah, I mean we didn't we kind of saw ourselves as a kind of a standalone and that still do as a standalone, not really part of a scene, really. I still think that's the case. Certainly musically, I couldn't really. I mean, we kind of it's interesting because we lived through what they called new rave, you know, the kind of the Klaxons, CSS, who else was there? Um New Young
MGMT, I don't know if
New
they've
Young
thrown in.
Pony Club. Yeah. And we can't it's interesting we've kind of those bands have fallen by the wayside, but we're still here, you know. That was an interesting time. There were bands that you could kind of naturally associate with us, maybe like MIA, yeah, CSS, certainly, you know. So we kind of for a minute there we felt there were vaguely aesthetically similar bands, but I never really thought we were the same. But you could kind of um vaguely lump us in. Yeah. But I always thought of us as a standalone thing. Mainly, like I said earlier, it's mainly the kind of the mindset of it being coming from a kind of a noise angle than a clubby angle. So when people kind of lumped us in as I say, hey, you're a party band, you know, I always squirmed a little bit of that because I thought the kind of the chaotic element kind of put us a barrier around us in some way, you know.
Hmm. But working with Chuck D, I mean, was that a big moment, obviously?
Yes. I mean, he was the first male singer on any Gotim song. I think that's still the case now, actually. um, I mean, the song that he appeared on, "Flashlight Fight," just naturally sort of lent itself to him. I could just hear him already before, you know. And we asked him fucking way back, and he was just there was radio silence, and then like 6 months later he popped up and said, "Oh, do you still want me to do it?" So it was like, yeah, and it we weren't in the same room, but yeah, I mean, I think he dug the song. I think he likes us, and you know, I mean, Public Enemy is ridiculous. They're again, I think they're like a unique band. The way that they sampled and the way that they kind of chop stuff up, and yeah, that kind of element of chaos. If you listen to how much is going on, it's almost like buddy industrial music or something. You know, it's almost like concrete. They use like sound effects and all sorts of mental stuff. So yeah, I mean, they've always been a big influence, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And did you write the lyrics for his part, or did he kind of have some
No,
influence? No.
no, he did his thing. Yeah.
Oh, cool. And then after the third album, was the idea that you were gonna split up, so to speak, or stop doing
Uh,
things for a while?
well, it was kind of that lineup naturally ran its course because some of the members couldn't carry on and stuff like that. Um, I didn't really think of stopping the band, but I was thinking, um, yeah, maybe a lineup change or something. I didn't particularly know what would happen, to be honest, but it was. I thought I would try and write a more melodic, more kind of pop, more melody driven song than the car chase and sirens double dutch thing that everyone had assumed we'd always do, you know. So I was kind of did the scene between, which is much more about songwriting and melody and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that album. And I was reading that you deliberately chose like kind of relatively unknown singers to work with on that album.
Yeah, I mean, I often, if you use a guest vocalist, that becomes the story of the record, you know, like Unroller Blackouts, everyone kept banging on about Best Coast being on it or something. So, and I'm a big fan of voices that are on the edge of professionalism or something, however you want to say it. You know, there's only certain particular kinds of voices I like. I've got a phobia of like over singing or that kind of the modern way that people sing these days, where it's kind of it's almost like a facsimile of emotion. You know, it's they kind of go through the motions of what they think singing is. You know, and so I'm trying to kind of tap into more of a bedroom way of singing, more like a friend who's got a good voice or something like that, rather than, hey, I am a singer and I'm going to sing professionally and well over this song, you know. So I was more interested in that, tracking down people all around the world that had interesting voices, and yeah. So yeah, that's what I did, and most of them were pretty unknown. There were lots of sort of band campy type people in there, you know, a gospel choir and stuff like that. But yeah, I think, I mean, it kind of went under the radar, that record, because it didn't fit the idea of what we were supposed to be, I think. But yeah.
Okay. And then yeah, you mentioned the Best Curse thing. Like how did that come about?
I think it was just a MySpace discovery, to be honest. She wasn't well known at the time. I mean, I had this song By Nothing Day that I knew the kind of voice I knew I wanted, this kind of West Coast, you know, sun drenched kind of voice. And I can't remember how I found her. It was literally, I think it was MySpace and a random email. And then in the intervening 6 months, she got hyped to fuck. But, but yeah, I still I still think By Nothing Day is probably one of the defining go-to moments, you know.
Yeah, I was reading it got a lot of attention, a lot of praise. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pleased with it as well because it didn't fit into the cheerleader stereotype. You know, it was a stepping stone to singing rather than shouting. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And then so with the albums, oh, is that a good question? I was gonna say like, has Ninja sung on most of the albums or not really?
Certainly from 2 and 3. She wasn't on 4 because we were kind of taking a break, and then she was on 5. Yeah, she's on all of them to some degree. Yeah, apart from, well, she's even on the Thunderlying Strike on the second version. Yeah,
Okay, cool. And then I was reading like 2021, some kind of loss of hearing that you suffered or something.
that's right. Yeah.
What? Yeah,
Uh,
go on, sorry.
so yeah, it was October 21, a normal Thursday, I believe it was. Got up and realized something had changed in my hearing, and it was like all the fucking bass had gone from my right ear, and it kind of fluctuated over the weeks, and it became like Daleki at some time, like so it's almost like you were hearing two songs playing at once, which is fucking really trippy. And obviously, I was panicking because I thought, oh man, I'm never going to be able to um play live or even listen mixed records or anything. You know, if you imagine when you speak on a microphone, it's got feedback on it. So there's like a note. It was like that. So music just sounded absolutely mental. At the first, when it first happened, I thought it was because I never wear earplugs on stage, and I used to love that. I used to crave that onslaught of volume, you know. So I thought it'd finally caught up with me, but it turned out, well, someone looked at my ear and said he got wax in there. I got it taken out, and nothing changed. And that was the moment when it dawned on me, oh, I'm in trouble here. And it was like that shot in Jaws when it's like a crash zoom. And I just knew, I just thought, oh my God, here we go. This is properly serious now, you know. So yeah, it kind of changed over a few weeks. It kind of changed a little bit up and down, getting better, worse, and then it kind of just stuck being bad. And there was a point where somebody told me, for those 3 weeks, I thought it's going to come back and it will go back to normal. But then one visit to the hospital confirmed that it's gone for good, and that's when it. Um, and yes, so I think the next 6 months or to a year, there was some kind of almost PTSD kind of vibe going down, you know, um, of trying to get my head around it. And bizarrely enough, a similar thing happened to Sam, our other guitarist, where he lost his hearing overnight as well. Um, but I mean, it was literally in the middle of making Get Up Sequences Part One. Um, so halfway through the album, just lost my hearing basically on my right side. So yeah, that wasn't ideal. That kind of slowed everything down. And if you can imagine songs I'd known I could hear properly, and now I could only hear half of it. But you know, I kind of carried on and mixed it, you know, kind of panned things around as I thought it should be. I was kind of guessing a little bit, got a few professionally types to have a little listen over and stuff. So I kind of muddled through it, and I think it was actually helpful, the whole process of not just taking my mind off something, but also surrounding myself in that music. You know, um it's quite weird to be surrounding yourself in so-called upbeat music, or whatever you want to call it, but actually be kind of vaguely traumatized, you know. So I think it was actually a helpful process, and I think I called it like a life raft at the time, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the reason for it? Was it being exposed to loud music or what?
It's this quite a rare thing called Meniere's disease.
Oh, right, okay.
People don't exactly know what it is or how it happened, or there's no real reason for it. It just happens. So uh the first thing I read was it's more damaging to your quality of life than cancer. I was like, oh fuck, brilliant. But
Blimey.
it hasn't turned out to be that at all. It's just that I can't hear. Or, it's fine. It's turned out to be fine. It didn't pan out to be as bad in its current state as I thought it would be, and I can still fucking make music and I can still jump around on stage. So it's not much else to it, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think I worked with someone who had that. Did Ryan Adams have it as well? I think.
Ryan Adams, that's right, exactly. Yeah, he had to give up touring. He would literally, it affects your balance, and he would literally just be standing there on stage and then be on the floor the next minute. You know, it you can have these vertigo attacks where you literally just go and hit the floor and the whole room spinning. I haven't had that so far, so I'm probably the lucky one, one of the lucky ones at the minute. Yeah, but
Yeah, yeah.
who else had it? Uh, Huey Lewis of Huey Lewis and the News has got
Oh,
it.
really?
I think Chris Pacham's got it as well. Anyway, it's not a massive deal, so it's cool.
Okay, nice one. Um, yeah, with the filmmaking, then have you carried that on at all, or was it just put to the side when you started music?
I make lots of the music videos, uh,
Okay, cool.
like the last few, like Whammy-O and Look Away, the Me Frequency. I made all of those, and I've almost always got on tour. I've always got a Super 8 camera with me. That's I'm obsessed with Super 8, and I just just document stuff. Film off the screen. I've got a Super 8 camera next to the TV, so I can just, if there's any cool shots, I just capture it all. So yeah, and in the same way that I hoard melody ideas, I hoard these little shots on my Super 8 camera, and I keep notebooks and my phone full of like slogans and stuff like that. So I think a big part of the process for me is hoarding and digging it out when the time comes, you know, biding your time, hanging on to that chorus or that sample or that break or whatever, and choosing your moment to use it, you know, because I'm sitting on good stuff all the time that I'm just waiting for a home, you know, waiting for that perfect moment to slot it in, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And then you've been playing festivals this year, is that right? Like, how have they been?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, I think that the band lineup's shit hot. You know, they're all proper shredders. You know, uh, you know, they actually warm up on their instruments and stuff like that. You know, I'm just an absolute gibbon on guitar, really. Yeah, we've done some interesting ones. We played with Nile Rodgers on a couple of shows. That's kind of interesting, just to see just the slickness of that operation. It's a bit of a sight to behold. Yeah, we did some killer ones, man. We did Crank and House. That's a really nice one. Have you ever been to that?
No, no. Where's
Uh,
that?
Up in the Lake District.
Oh,
Uh,
that's not too far away from me, actually.
and Blue Dot. That was a good
Oh,
one.
yeah.
It's just up the road from Newcastle.
Okay, cool. Did he do some kind of live thing with Tim Burgess for that? It's a listening party thing.
That's right. A live listening party. Yeah.
That's quite cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then you got some. Is it one show you've got, or a few shows for the anniversary of the first album?
Yeah. I mean, there's one major one next February in the Roundhouse where we're playing Thunder Lightning Strike from start to finish for the first time ever, and including quite a few songs which we've never played live, you know, more the sort of piano-y ones and stuff. So that'd be cool.
Yes.
Um, and that's undoubtedly going to sell out by looking at the ticket sales and stuff. So
It's a
that'll
cool
be
venue as well, yeah.
yeah, that'll be a night to remember. And I think we're gonna do some US dates and stuff as well. And yeah, just keep going, keep on keeping on.
Yeah, is that the kind of ambition now, just to like, don't know really, just see how it goes, keep going kind of thing?
Well, I mean, next year is going to be is 20 years since done Lightning Strike, so I guess there'll be some stuff around that. As much as I'm unsure about that concept, but fuck it. But yeah, I'm yeah. I mean, I always think that there's always more stuff to try with the Go team. You know, I've never really had the sense that it's reached the end of the road or anything. In fact, I'm kind of overwhelmed with possibility. You know, yeah, I still think there's loads of stuff we haven't tried, and you know, we could go in so many different directions. You know, we could go more marching band, or we could go noisier, or whatever. You know, so yeah, yeah.
Who do you bounce ideas off certain people in that respect, like the band or anyone?
Uh normally quite late down the road. Maybe my partner, um, but not really. No, it's normally quite a way down the line before I do that. Um, yeah, I think my my kid, my 9-year-old is quite interesting because he's musical in a similar way to me. So he kind of sings songs all day, and sometimes I catch him singing Go Team songs. Like he's always singing Go Team songs around the house. It's really interesting. So and if it's a one I haven't released yet, that's particularly interesting. You know, like there's a particular one he keeps singing. I was like, okay, maybe that one's worth pursuing. You know,
Yeah,
I think it's a good test, the kid test. You know.
yeah. That's interesting, yeah. And then yeah, cheers for your time. Just finish on a few questions. I always like to ask people if they've got like a funny story. I'll put the Gallagher brothers, but just about maybe a big name in music or a big event or something.
I know we were playing at a festival once, and James Brown was playing at it when he was still alive. And Ninja went along all the I think it was like Norway or something. She went down all the corridors, knocking on all the doors, and eventually Mrs. Brown um answered the door, and she said, "Can you James is James Brown there or something?" She said, "I know he's asleep now," but she gave something for him to sign, and obviously he didn't. But um, but yeah, that's Ninja for you.
Fair play. How obviously festivals are massive now, aren't they? Like there's so many.
Hmm.
But like how has that changed over the years? That like how does that suit your lifestyle festivals?
I'm not a fan of festivals, to be honest. I much prefer our own gigs. I like the audience being near. I hate those massive bloody stay. You know, I think if you're indoors in a tent in a festival late at night, it's cool. Like we were in Blue Dot, that's heavenly. But yeah, I much prefer our own shows. I think they're much more sweaty, and don't know, people just get it more. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I'm too miserable for festivals.
yeah. Should be a t-shirt with that on. And then yeah, just to finish on it, like what's been the high point so far, and is there anything you'd have done differently?
I mean, for me, it's I mean, it's the fact that we're still here is quite a big deal. When, like I said, all our contemporaries have fallen by the wayside, and I think we're kind of as good, and I think the music is as good as it was. Yeah, I mean, for me, the highlight is always playing Japan. It's almost like I'm just killing time until we get to Japan. That's the prize. Um, I mean, yeah, there's plenty of little things I've done differently, like taken that song off that album, or put that one on, or not done the NME tour. But generally, yeah, I think I mean, I think all a band can do is to try and kind of leave your mark. And I think if you said that's Go Teamy or that sounds like the Go Team, I think people would know what you meant. And I think if you leave your mark, your own vision, your own way of seeing the world and seeing music, I think there is a proper legacy to the band, and I think I think people could go on exploring it and stuff because I think we're kind of still under the radar, which is fine, but yeah. So I'm kind of happy, really.
Cool. And nearly forgot the questions that came in. So let's have a quick look at them. Yeah, well, someone mentioned on Instagram, they said it wasn't really a question, but Sam Venton just said massively underrated band should have and deserve to be massive.
That's what I just said.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Is that something you feel like you bothered?
It doesn't bother me, but I think it's true. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the production. I don't know if it's because it's a male female. I don't know, but I don't think too hard about it.
Yeah. Andy Manch on Twitter says, ask if you can join the band.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then Dan Bunton said, when are you going to America?
We haven't announced it yet, but we are going next year. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.